Welcome to the Engineering, Emotions, and Energy podcast. I'm your host, Justin Wink. Good to be with you today. Fantastic topic. This is one of those topics that I'd heard about it a lot, known about it, yet it wasn't until, it was probably about a year ago, maybe a year and a half, when I had the fortune to get really deep into it. And I realized how important it can be. And this is going to be something where you might not even realize how much you need what we're about to talk to today. Because if you're like most of us, you might not even realize the weight that has been weighing you down, making things more challenging than it needs to be. That once you realize what this is and you start practicing the tools to sort of let it go, how much lighter you can, as we'll find out later in the show, physically lighter and freer that you will end up being, and you'll be able to have better relationships, you'll feel better, and just you'll get more out of life that you've always wanted. Now, what exactly is that might be weighing you down? It's pent up, accumulated over a lifetime resentments and anger. Now, it might be one of those things you're thinking, Justin, I'm not an angry person. There's no one that I can think back to be angry. And this is really common at first. Yet, I'd really like to challenge you on that and ask, if you really go back through your entire life, is there literally nobody that you can think of that you go back and it could have even been, when you were in sixth grade. I know for me, I had who used to be a longtime friend turned someone, who would make fun of me and bully me. And there was a lot of anger that I still kept if I thought about that instant in time. That, oh man, James was a real dick to me. Why was he so upset, so mean? So I'd really question, hey, yeah, really nothing, nobody? And if not anyone else, this is really fascinating. So I recently heard a survey done by Mind Valley, Vishen Lakhiani's Mind Valley, where he surveyed about 2,000 people that were going to be attending one of his talks. And they asked basically, what's the most challenging aspects of, anger, things that, they hold resentments about. And not surprising, the largest number was 45% was just forgiving other people. Then the other category that you might go like, yeah, of course, is any sort of past traumas, like really traumatic events that might have happened where violence was involved or something really, really, truly traumatic happened in their life. But the third category, which is not small at all, is anger towards oneself. 35% of respondents said that the self-anger, thinking back into a time earlier in their life where it's just like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. Like for me, one of those instances was I once bought a pair of shoes at a Kmart for $2.49. And I since after that, I can't remember if that was likely before I had my first knee surgery, but I've since had 4 knee surgeries in my life. And there were times I would look back at myself and go like, Justin, you idiot, like you caused so much damage with those horrible shoes that were basically like tying rocks to your feet. Like what was wrong with you? Why were you so cheap? Why were you so stubborn? Why didn't you care about yourself more? So you're probably wondering, well, what is the answer to letting go of this weight of anger and resentment that we might still be carrying around towards other people and even more likely ourselves? The answer is you might get upset because, again, it's something you've probably heard of. The answer is forgiveness. So listen, I feel you. You've heard of it, but what does it really mean? And even if you knew what it really meant, why bother? Well, let me explain the reason why forgiveness is so powerful. So a few things I want to share with you. So one is, these were some studies done at the 40 Years of Zen. This was set up by Dave Asprey, where they have people all hooked up so they can get really detailed information on the state of the brain and the brain waves. And they started noticing that some people were able to get really, really coherent alpha brain waves, which is effectively the state that, Zen monks that have been practicing compassion meditation for decades are able to get into. And at first, they didn't exactly understand how, effectively lay people were able to do this. And then it turned out that the magic practice that was going on internally was the act of forgiveness. So forgiveness can improve your ability to get into these more relaxing states of being of the brain, which are very conducive to meditation and subconscious transformation. The other is there was a study done in 2017, published in the Annals of Behavioral Medicine, which showed statistically provable improvements in mental health, reduction in depression. And then I mentioned it earlier when I first started the podcast that it could literally make you lighter. And by lighter, you'll understand this next study was published in 2014, where they did research with basketball players and they measured how high they could jump before doing forgiveness practices. And then afterwards, it was a measurable amount of higher jumping ability. So they were literally lighter by letting go of the weights of past anger and resentment by practicing forgiveness. How cool is that? Just how amazing. So now that I've described, the benefits, you might be going like, okay, well, Justin, where do I begin? How do I even do that? What does that look like? Because it's, okay, maybe I can say I forgive, but is that enough? And it turns out that there is a practice, and I'm going to describe the most effective that I know of. This is something that I've been practicing for quite a while, and I've also found forgiveness to be so important that when I had an opportunity to experience plant medicine, which is where it's a psychedelic type experience where you have the opportunity to have things brought to your mind that otherwise you might not have even been aware of happened. And lots of people have very different experiences. The biggest experiences I had was the bringing up of moments in my life where I felt anger or resentment towards either myself or others, and having that opportunity to forgive either myself or the other person. There's probably more than I can remember, but there was definitely at least 30 instances of vignettes that were brought to my attention. In sixth grade, the friend James, who later became a bully of mine, things like that, to even something as silly as when I was in junior high and bought a Speed Racer shirt because I thought Speed Racer was cool at the time, and wearing it to school the first day, and the kid in the hall passing by just goes in a mocking tone, "Go Speed Racer, go!" And I never wore that shirt to school ever again because of what that other teenager said to me. So from little to big, to things having to do with my family, things having to do with past relationships. So that's how important forgiveness can be. And having had that experience, both practicing before, which helped make when I was having the experience with the plant medicine that much more easier, and now afterwards, I have been seeing tremendously easier times with what were previously challenging relationships. So like interacting with, my father and other friends where maybe would have been a situation where I would have been much more quick to anger. I am not. And I'm able to forgive more quickly in real time. So how do you do this, right? That's going to be the big question. So I'm going to take you through the steps. So first, you want to identify who I'm going to go over the steps, and then we'll kind of go in depth a little bit more. So first, you want to identify the person or the act that you want to forgive. Then you want to sort of picture this person, and you want to read the charge of what was done wrong. Then you want to feel feel what happened. You want to feel the pain. Then you want to identify from this experience, what did you learn from it, right? Because we often, through our pain, there's often growth, right? Like if you've ever seen a bird being born from an egg, you realize that that is not an easy experience, that it's a challenge. It looks exhausting to getting through that egg and to hatch into, what was meant to be. But if it wasn't for that challenge of busting through the egg, it would never get to be a full-grown bird that can take flight and soar like a mighty eagle or whatever that bird might be. Or perhaps you're more of a chicken person. I don't know. So what have you learned from the experience? And then flip the perspective, right? How was it from that other person? What might they have experienced throughout their lives? Remembering that hurt people hurt people. And then after seeing it from their eyes, forgive them into love. Forgive into love by visualizing giving them a hug if you're able to. Now, you might then need to ask yourself, have I truly let this go, or do I need to do this again? So now I'm going to go through these steps a little bit more in depth. So the first is identifying who you want to forgive. So I find it really helpful because if you're just going to sit down and do a forgiveness practice and just kind of like start a clock and go, okay, time to forget you. I often go, I don't know. I can't think of anything upsetting me because that's one of my patterns in the past has been to sort of just brush stuff aside. And if it wasn't really a big issue, but sit down with a pen and a paper and just start thinking, well, what are some instances in my life that things didn't really go the way I would have liked them to? And don't think of like, well, that really wasn't that big a deal. If it was a big deal to you, it was a big deal to you. Like me, that kid's taunting me for my Speed Racer shirt, for whatever reason, that little tiny thing impacted me for so much of my younger life. So that goes on the list. Think of family members, your immediate family. Think of extended family. Was there a time that you were visiting with maybe grandparents, an aunt and uncle? Somebody did something or said something on the playground. Then as you got older, when you were in junior high or high school, moving on to perhaps university. And then anytime maybe you had work, and you might be surprised how many names could go down on this list. I know I've got my list here, and it's probably a list of 20 different names, and it's going from family members, a chorus teacher, playground friends. When I played football, there were a couple of football players that were kind of rough and mean to me. The ex-girlfriends, the hurt and pain of going through breakups. What about those? Teachers that might have given me a hard time, coaches, managers, other coworkers. And the other thing that's really important is to then look back at your own life. At what times in your life did you make a mistake, or did you do something to either yourself or someone else that you still have some anger at yourself? And what age were you? What did you do? And note that down. So like for me, a good one would have been, I was probably around 22, maybe 23. And I let a woman I was dating drive my car, and she ended up driving the car off a curvy 2-lane down a 40-foot embankment into a tree, totaling my car. The airbags exploded all over the place, and I had to call a friend to come to pick us up, and then I had to call my dad at the time and go, "Hey, Dad, the car's been totaled. I didn't do it, but I let another young woman drive my car, and she totaled it." And it's for the longest time I was so angry at myself. Why did you let this other person that clearly didn't have good driving ability drive your car and crash the thing? So think of those times through your life and note those down. And you might be surprised at how long the list is. And there's nothing wrong with having the long list. And once you have the list, start with something easy. So if on your list is perhaps a really, really abusive person in your life that literally caused horrible, horrible trauma, I would advise you do not start there. Please do not start there. Start with some low hanging fruit, like uh, perhaps something recent, like, the guy in the blue van cut me off. Start there, something where it could be really easy. So we're going to use the guy in the blue van that cut you off as the example going through the rest of the show. So once you have that and you've picked it, now you want to sort of think of a space where you can have that person come to mind. It could be where the event actually took place. So you could picture yourself in your car and seeing the guy in the blue van cutting you off. If that's too intense, come up with a neutral space. It's kind of like a blank space covered in clouds. If you ever saw the show Quantum Leap, there was sort of like, when he was between worlds, I believe, where Sam and the Scott Bakula guy, they would be sort of like in a neutral future place. It was all white. Kind of looks like that for me. But pick a place that's conducive for you, because the next part is going to be start to get a little bit more intense. The next thing you do is you read off the charge, sort of as if you were in a court of law. And speaking of a court of law, the very important thing is that forgiveness, it's all about you. It's not about the other person. It's about you letting go of the anger. So if someone actually did something criminally wrong, you do not let them off the hook, because there might need to be where you do need to press charges, you do need to take them to court, or you do need to no longer interact with this person in your life because they're harmful and likely to cause hurt over and over again. So forgiveness is not about allowing this person to freely continue doing, possibly illegal or hurtful things. This is about your relationship with the acts that have happened and no longer carrying that anger around, so that you can get those benefits of better mental health, improved physical abilities, and more coherent brain waves in the state that you want to be in. So once you read the charges, so this guy in the blue van, you got in front of me and you almost made me swerve and possibly hurt someone else. And I got so frustrated, so angry. And at this point, you want to feel that anger, feel that pain. And depending on the act, this could be really traumatized. There's times where I will start crying, I'll start tearing up, because it's just so intense. And the reason for the feeling this is because we so much is about the contrast. Like, we can't have the sweet without the sour. We can't have the light without the dark. So it's noticing that, yes, this has been real. This has happened, that there has been pain caused, and we're being aware of it. And so feel it for 1 minute, 2 minutes at the most. And then after you've been feeling this anger and this pain, you switch it to how, because of this experience, how have you learned and how have you grown? So in something simple like the cutting off, maybe you learned to be aware while you're driving, and you learned how to respond quickly and avoid an accident when something unexpected happens, right? So find whatever way that, because of this experience, you went from being that little baby eagle in the egg to this event was you sort of being forced to get out of that shell, and you've grown somewhat in some way. Then the next step is to flip the perspective, and how was the other person hurt in the past, possibly, that led up to them behaving in this way. So if we're talking about the guy in the blue car cutting you off, perhaps they were taught that way, or perhaps that they were in a rush. Maybe they overslept and their boss called them and said, "You're fired if you don't get here as soon as possible." See from the other person's eyes and remember the simple statement that hurt people hurt people. So like the old schoolyard chum James that turned from friend into foe effectively, I don't necessarily know, but I think maybe his parents were having some issues and they would take it out on him, and he just wanted to feel important, and so he started, making fun of me and taking things out on me. And when I look at it from that standpoint, my heart kind of grows. I go from being the Grinch at the beginning of The Grinch Who Stole Christmas to more at the end where it grew 3 sizes bigger. So really try to see the situation from their eyes. Maybe they didn't even notice. It wasn't even intentional.
Feeling overwhelmed by the daily grind? Imagine if you could pause, reset, and truly connect with a calmer, more fulfilled you. It's not just a dream, it's absolutely possible. Hi, I'm Justin, and I invite you to discover the life-changing techniques in my book, Engineered to Love. Right now, I'm offering a free chapter complete with guided audios that have already helped so many people find peace amidst the chaos. These aren't just any techniques. They're transformative practices designed to help you love yourself and engage deeply with the present moment, without even having to close your eyes to the world around you. So join us at engineeredtolove.com/sample and access your free guided session. It's time to bust the busyness and embrace the joy, ease, and love in your everyday life. Don't wait. Start your journey to a more relaxed and recharged you today, because you deserve to live a life you love. Visit engineeredtolove.com/sample. See you there.
And then the most powerful step after all of this is to forgive and to love. And if you can visualize or get the feeling of kind of like giving them a hug that you understand, you're not letting the behavior off the hook. You're not saying that's good, but if you had gone through their entire life up until that moment, you would understand the circumstances that led them to do that, and that they are a human just like you are a human, and that you can understand that and forgive and let go of the anger and give them a virtual hug and let that go, and let the person sort of fade away. Now, for a really powerful experience, something very traumatic, this might require multiple iterations. And so afterwards, you can ask kind of your higher self, or if there's some other being you like to kind of check in with, whatever that is, whatever you kind of can go, just kind of asking the question, am I done forgiving this incident? And you'll usually kind of get a feeling of either like, yeah, yes, that is so much better. And that means that you're cleared. You've let that incident go. Or you might kind of get a tightness or just this feeling, or maybe you'll even hear it, that got to do it again. Whatever that indication is, repeat the forgiveness the following day with the same incident. And you'll notice the intensity starts to decrease and decrease until eventually you'll get to the end and you'll know that you've released it. Now, I believe I'm probably about a year-ish into forgiveness practice, but you'll notice that very advanced practitioners in mindfulness, Buddhist monks and some other spiritual masters, they don't necessarily do forgiveness practices. Neil Donald Walsh, the author of Conversations with God, says the master can never forgive, for the master understands. What this means is that if you already basically are doing that whole process that we just did, the forgiveness practice, in real time, there's nothing to forgive, because nothing ever truly angers you, because you understand that this person is just a human like you are, and that the circumstances have led to them doing the behavior, and that there's nothing truly wrong or upsetting about anything that has been done in a very, very global setting. So again, it's not to say that the behavior is maybe not against the law, or maybe didn't actually cause pain. Just there's nothing to carry on. The incident is the incident, and you move on. You don't carry any anger or ill emotion, because you understand, and you do that almost in an instant. Because forgiveness, really, like almost any other practice, is something that over time you become better and better and master it. And you can become a master and you can understand, and then there's no more need to forgive, because you just understand, and there's no more residual resentment, anger that comes from any event that happens. And one really powerful practice that can kind of help with understanding that I recently learned. It's called the diner practice, and I've been trying to practice this while driving, because the reason I use the guy in the blue car is because in the past, people's driving behaviors used to just drive me bananas. Where, like, there's George Carlin had a bit where, how come everyone going faster than you is a maniac and anyone going slower than you is an idiot, but I'm the only one that knows how to drive perfectly? That was basically how I viewed driving, is that I'm the one that knows what I'm doing, but everyone else is either an idiot or a maniac. And so the way the diner practice works is, if, say, somebody does really bad service or messes something up, just kind of laugh and go, there I go again, forgetting to get the customer the coffee. Just sort of realizing that there might have been a time where that was you, because maybe in your life you actually were a waiter or a waitress, or you can see that that's a possibility, and that at times you've made mistakes, that you've forgotten things, or you've treated people poorly, and just kind of have that, there I go again, realizing that there really isn't any distinction between us. And instead of, and I'm awful, I've been awful at this in the past, it's still something I practice, where if someone wrongs me, I really need to step away and realize that, hey, it likely wasn't personal, it was likely a lack of awareness, or it was a misunderstanding or misinterpretation on my part. And when I don't do that, I can sometimes go like, well, I need to teach them that what they did was wrong. Often people, they'll learn their lesson or they won't, and it's not up to you or me to force that lesson. So really, when we're trying to force that lesson on someone else, it's us. Again, a lot of this, I always like the saying of being resentful is like taking poison and expecting it to harm the other person. So the more that we can sort of flip that and go from I want to punish or make an example of how can I love, because if we see that this person is in a state that like we can be in, so if the waiter or waitress gives horrible service, instead give even more of a tip instead of a less of a tip. Because if we think of like, well, we could have the same thing. How would we want to be treated in that? Because maybe we're having a hard day, and that little bit of extra love and compassion flips it around and allows for that space. And then maybe the next patron, the next person driving, the next person that they interact with gets the love, kind, aware, immaculate service and abilities that, that we would have wanted. And if we all kind of do that, it's kind of ends up being a pay it forward thing, where eventually we all live in a much more loving, kind, connected world. So I'm going to recap the steps of the forgiveness practice. So again, it's identify ahead of time who you want to forgive. And I really do recommend taking the time to create a list that can be kind of your go-to, and just even rank it from, minor to major, and go through easiest, because it's like little victories, right? It's very much like a muscle. You don't go to the gym and put 400 pounds on the bench press, right? No, you start maybe with the bar and just get the movements down, and then you add a little and a little more and a little more. But eventually, with practice, you're able to do large amounts of weights. You're able to work with that very traumatic, that very, very angering person that just, you don't even want to think about them or say their name. They're like Voldemort, and you can handle it. So get that person, then create the space where you will read them the charge, then feel that anger, feel that pain, and then think of what you learned because of that experience. Next, see it from their eyes, and remember that hurt people hurt people. Next, you want to end by forgiving into love, possibly hugging, and then repeat the process if needed by asking your higher self or whoever, whatever, for guidance. Hey, am I clear of this? Have I let this go, or do I need to do it again? So looking forward to, hearing what you guys think. How are you able to practice this? What could make it easier? Hit me up on social media, Justin Wenck, WENCK. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Looking forward to teaching you guys more ways to be less stressed, more impactful, and have happier relationships on the next episode. Thank you and good day.